Hello everybody and welcome back to On Point HQ. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I paint Australian jungle infantry very quickly. If you've seen a video I did earlier this month about how I go about painting my late war Germans, the process is going to be very similar to the way that I did that video. So what I'm not going to be doing is sitting here for an hour painting this figure. What I'm going to be doing is painting it section by section, going away, taking some photographs and then showing you what I've done and just talking through the paints and the techniques that I've used. I think that worked really quite well for that video. It was a good way of putting it together, and I think it's been quite popular, which is kind of nice. So what I'm going to be doing today is painting this. Now technically this is not Australian jungle infantry, it's an Australian commando figure, but to all intents and purposes I use the same process when I'm painting regular infantry to when I'm painting Australian commandos, so the process is going to be exactly the same. So what I'll do is I'll talk through what parts I'm going to paint, what colours I'm going to use and what techniques I'm going to use. So to start off with, you will see that this figure it's been undercoated in my usual burnt umber. And then what I've then done is given it a full coat of Vallejo Russian uniform green. I use this on all my jungle Australians. It's a really good colour, and it works well with the wash that I'll use later on in the process. So like I said, that's been given an entire coating of that, 2 or 3 diluted coat to get good coverage. And again, this gives me a good sort of base to work with. What I'm going to be doing next is adding the flesh. Now I'll be using this, as with doing the Germans, I'll be using Citadel's Acadian flesh tone. Again, really good flesh paint this, and it works well with the washes that I'll use later on in the process for doing the flesh and skin covered areas. So without further ado, I shall crack on with the skin, and once that's done I'll come back and show you what I've done. See you soon. Hello and welcome back, and as you'll see from the photographs on the screen now, that's the flesh applied to all areas of the model that require it. Like I mentioned before, what I've used is Citadel's Acadian flesh tone excuse me, and this has been applied in 3 or 4 even diluted coats for good coverage. This has been applied to the face and the arms. I've also taken the opportunity at this stage to paint the hair on the model as well, so there is some hair just peeking out from underneath his hat, and I've used Vallejo Desert Yellow to paint this. Again, at this stage I don't need to be, well, I'm not looking to be overly accurate. I can always cover up any areas before the wash goes on later. And as the late great Bob Ross used to say, we don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents. So that's the philosophy I always follow when I'm painting, and it works. But that's all the flesh put on there now. So the next stage in the process will just be to complete the rest of the equipment. So for this I'll be using Vallejo Khaki Grey, and this will be going onto the ammo pouches, the rucksack, gaiters and hat. Next will be his rifle, which I'll paint using German Camo Black Brown. And lastly will be his boots and his water bottle, which I'll paint using Vallejo Chocolate Brown. Once that's done, that's pretty much the basic painting for the model completed. There's not a lot of equipment on these guys, which makes my life a lot easier, especially when you've been used to painting late war Germans who are absolutely covered in equipment. This makes a nice refreshing change, and you can fly through these really pretty quickly. But that's where we're at. So again, same ethos as when I was painting my late war Germans, limited palettes, limited colours. It makes the process easier to run through, and it gives the overall section and army that really cohesive look that I always aim for when I'm doing my bolt action armies. Right, I shall now be going away painting the equipment, and I will be back presently to show you what I've done. So see you soon. Hello and welcome back, and from the photographs on the screen now you'll see what I've been up to. So like I mentioned in the previous segment, I've painted the equipment, so his pouches, his hat, his rifle, boots and gaiters, and that's the model pretty much ready for washing now. Again, I've used very few paints on painting this. And this is a deliberate excuse me, this is a deliberate plan. Like I mentioned before, least amount of colours brings a more cohesive look to an overall section, and then in turn to an overall army. So whenever I sit down and plan a project, I always think of what limited palette I'm going to use to make it more cohesive. So with these, again, very few colours gone into this, but this is now ready for the wash. So what wash do I use? Well, again, I'm returning to Citadel's washes because they're really good. Now with my Germans, I use a lot of Agrax Earthshade. In fact, the whole model were covered in the stuff because it works really well. For the Australians though, it's a little bit different. I could probably use Agrax over this green and it wouldn't detract from it. It would work. What I use though is this Athonian camo shade. It's a really kind of, it's a dark green, but not like a stark dark green, if you know what I mean. And it works really well in conjunction with the Russian uniform. There's another wash called Coelia green shade. Now this is far too green. I don't know whether I've actually ever used this. Well, I can't record using it, but for bolt action I use a lot of Athonian camo shade. Another advantage of this is if you ever use auto predict, Athonian camo shade comes up as Athonian lampshade. Yeah. Small things amuse small minds, but it made us laugh on the bolt action Facebook group once, so yeah, that's always a bit of fun. So what I'll be doing is applying this to the uniform, so just the green, and then for the skin, the equipment and the guns and the boots, I'll be going back to my old favourite Agrax Earthshade. Now it doesn't matter, oddly, if you apply these at the same time. I've seen no problems in doing this. I mean, they run a little, but it gives a bit more kind of realism, and builds up those recesses and shadows that we're looking for when we're applying these washes. But it's up to you whether you want to let the camo shade dry before you apply the Agrax. It's much of a muchness, really. One final wash after that is just the flesh, and what I tend to do is go over this again with Citadel's Reichland flesh shade. This just gives the flesh a bit more of a ruddier hue, and the flesh isn't so stark. Remember, these guys are out in the jungles in the heat, so your flesh is going to be affected. So I like to use a Reichland flesh shade just to bring it down and give it more of like I say, a ruddy hue. That's just my own personal preference that I use when painting flesh. So what I'm going to do now is go away, apply the washes. Once they're dry, I'll take some photographs and I'll come back. So see you soon. Hello and welcome back, and that's the washes applied. They've now dried, and the photographs on screen now will show you what it looks like once those washes have fully dried. Just to recap, I went over the green uniform with Athonian camo shade. Agrax Earthshade was applied to the boots, gaiters, water bottle, rifle and equipment such as the rucksack, the hat and the ammo pouches. Then once all that was dry, I went back in with Reichland flesh shade and just applied this to all flesh areas, and also the hair as well. Doesn't do any harm applying it to the hair as well. Again, like I mentioned in the previous segment, this just gives the skin a bit more of a darker, ruddy looking hue, a bit more realistic. But that's fully dry and almost done. So the next stage of the process is just to apply really basic highlights. As I mentioned in the video where I painted my late war Germans, for highlights I keep it basic. I don't go over the top, I don't go too in depth. When you're painting, you know, I'm painting one of these at the moment, just as an example. When I generally paint 10 at a time, and I want to get that section completed relatively quickly. So in-depth and multi-layered highlights isn't really something that I'm interested in this style of painting. What I do then, just to recap, is that I will use all the original base colours I used to paint the model and simply add a little dab of Vallejo Sunny Skin Tone. I use this rather than white or ivory. That would make the highlight a bit too stark, whereas the sunny skin tone gives it a nice muted look. It still works as a good highlight, but it's not as stark as it would be if I was to use ivory or white or any kind of sharp bright colour of that nature. What I'll also do as well is at that stage is just very simply apply some metallics to the rifle using Vallejo gunmetal grey. This will then be, once that's dried, this will then have a diluted wash of Nuln oil applied to the metallics, just to bring that down, just to mute it. So that's the next stage of what I'll be up to. So I'm going to go away, apply these highlights, take some more photographs, and I will see you soon. Hello and welcome back, and that is the figure finished. So there'll be a few photographs on the screen now of the fully completed figure. A few of them at the end I've got a filter over them because it's become remarkably sunny here all of a sudden, and they slightly ruin my photographs. So I put a filter over them just to bring out the highlights, to show you the last stage that I've completed on the figure. But that's it. So that's the highlights completed, the metallics added to the rifle, and that's all finished. Now, in my opinion, it's a tabletop standard miniature, painted in less than, I think, about 25 minutes. I painted that, so really quite quickly to get through. So if you times that by 10, you can see how the process that I use allows me to really rattle through teams and sections at really quite a fast pace. And that's why I've managed to complete my Australian so quickly. So yeah, it's all done. Again, like I said with my late war Germans, is it going to win any painting competitions? Absolutely not. That's not the aim though. My aim, or my own personal aim, is to get models and figures from the box and the sprue to the tabletop as quickly as possible. And I think by using this technique, it's something that I do. It allows me to game more. I can play bolt action a lot more than I would do if I was using my old technique of painting individually. So it's something that I use, and like I mentioned in the previous painting video, I'd love to hear from people that take this technique and make it their own, use it on their own armies, their own nationalities, and improve on it. Again, it's a very simple technique. There's nothing groundbreaking here. It's just what I use to get the figures to tabletop in a relatively short space of time, and also just to outline the colours that I use as well. I know sometimes if I'm posting in the Bolt Action Facebook group, whether it's Australians or Germans, people often ask me what colours I use to achieve certain effects, and hopefully this helps. I love engaging with the community. I think that's one good thing about Bolt Action in general, is the community is fantastic, especially the Facebook group. It's a really vibrant, positive community that you can really get some fantastic feedback from. So I'm on there quite a lot, as you can imagine. But that's it. That's hopefully proven useful to some people. If you've got any comments or questions, just pop them down below and I will certainly respond to all comments and questions. Before I go, just a shameless plug for a new channel I've put together. Radically different to this one. This channel allowed me to combine two things I like doing. I like making videos, I like painting, I like talking about wargaming. That's one. Another passion I have is I'm a bit of a writer, and I've written for many years. So I decided to take the plunge and start another YouTube channel dedicated to poetry. Yes, it's a massive shift to what I normally do. But if you're interested in the written word, in poetry, in videos, or poetry set to videos, there's a link to my new channel in the description below. This will always be my primary channel. The poetry one is just something I'm doing more because I write a lot, but I never actually do anything with it. So I thought, well, let's just get it out there and see what happens. So if you're interested, check out the link and let me know what you think. But that's it for me. Thanks for watching as always. Take care, may your dice roll well, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye bye for now.